Welcome to episode 190 of the Daniel Yoris podcast with today's guest, Chris Liddle. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Joined here today by my friend, Chris Liddle. Chris, thanks for joining me, my man. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I've listened to several episodes of the show. I like what you do. I like your style. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. And thank you for the help tangentially, at least, and through the conversations that we've had on the tech side of things, and for waking up early, because we are in a time zone difference, and this is first thing in the morning for you, not crack of dawn, but early. So I appreciate the effort and the dedication. It means a lot.
No problem. Anything for you.
How do you introduce yourself? You are a man who wears many hats. You do many things, and you're very proficient at many things. How do you introduce yourself?
It's unique because I'm finding myself having come up with like a 30-second version more and more frequently. I typically say that I'm a personal trainer, online coach, and media consultant because I feel like that's the best way to kind of wrap it all up. I also toss in that I host a podcast called Chasing Common Ground. But that is basically how I say it concisely, and it can expand quite broadly, everything from drone videography to production behind the scenes at conferences to group consulting for fitness stuff, public speaking events, stuff like that. But primarily, I just take a lot of pride in helping people, and that's generally like the thing that comes up for whatever category I happen to be doing my work in.
From a more technical or skill-based perspective, what came first? Was it the media side of things that you started doing earlier on, or was it the fitness side of things that you started doing?
That's actually a really good question because it kind of forces me to reflect a bit more. And the thing is that when I was in high school, I was completely geared towards going into the film industry. I wanted to go to Vancouver Film School. I had gone into a preliminary, intensive weekend thing where we had to submit some of our work to be selected to go to this 2-day event. And I was uploading to a YouTube channel. All of those videos have been taken down because I was like,
Do you still have them?
I have them on an old school video camera. But I don't have the edited versions anymore. So I could go and do a from the vault from 20 years ago kind of thing like Disney does. But I had campfire skits. I was doing some satire skits on math and physics and stuff because I was projecting my unhappiness with certain school classes and stuff like that. And then when it came time to actually take the leap and kind of decide on my schooling journey, I was looking at the tuition and I was looking at the cost of living for Vancouver. The tuition alone was, I think, $30,000 a year. I was like, where does this money come from? I knew my parents were saving for education, but I was like, proportionately, this does not it doesn't make sense in my brain. My siblings who went to post-secondary in Edmonton, it cost dramatically less. So I was like, I need to make this make sense. And I don't even know if I'd get a job from this. And so then I did general studies and I worked retail. And then amidst that, I started to kind of slowly dabble in fitnessy things. I worked for a sporting goods company and kind of was in that world kind of passively. And then I had a quarter life crisis where I decided warehouse is not taking enough of my skills and passion and interests, and started delving into the fitness industry around the age of 25. And now I'm 32.
That's a very insightful journey to realize that the cost of this school thing and it doesn't really make sense. And now the other side of that is people I sold everything. I went into credit card debt. I took out lines of credit from the bank. I went all in and I made it work. But that's the needle in the haystack story of those things. Most people do that and end up broken without a job and with no skills. That is the most likely outcome, which is shit to say. Same as the fitness influencer thing. I'm sure there are kids now who hey, I like going to the gym. I want to be a rich personal trainer. I don't know, name your rich personal trainer who's on YouTube. And that's possible for sure, but it's not likely. The most likely scenario is that you're not going to be mega rich with millions of followers on YouTube and podcasts and Instagram and all of the places. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be poor and struggling, but like the most likely outcome is not super fame. So there's a balance there between maybe believing in ourselves to like go and get that thing and chase that dream, but also being a little bit realistic at the same time. And I'm not sure how to like strike that balance and how we even notice that, but there is a balance in there somewhere.
There really is. And kind of the way that you phrased that was kind of funny for me because I lacked the self-belief to go into fitness, but I had the self-belief, or I lacked the self-belief to go into film, I should say. And then I had the self-belief to go into fitness because I was willing to take zero risks to go into film. And like I tried a few, like I did sort of a side hustle marketing spin-off when I was still at the warehouse and I was going to do promotional videos for people, but I didn't like push it enough to get some traction. I wrote some resumes for people. I did some like graphic design. But then I was like, no, not working. But then when it came to fitness, like, whether people like it or not, I took on some crazy risks. Like I left a job without having been hired at a job. My line of credit did take quite a significant dip. Credit card took a dip, and this was less planned, but more just like outcome based. So I had faith that the first gym that I would be at would get me into a position of stability where I could kind of put all my eggs in one basket. And we had this like team building supper, and I'll never forget about it because of the impact that it had on my livelihood, where they were like, so you're at about 7 sessions a week. We're going to get you to 40 sessions per week by October. It was mid-September at that time, maybe early September. Mid-September, we have a meeting, and they're like, we're going to close the gym in October. And so that kind of like contrast put me in a position where I was taking on debt at an escalated rate, and I could either just throw my hands in the air and be like, I quit, I lost, or I could be like, okay, just lean in, let's recoup. And I recouped. Like I removed all of that debt. It took a lot of hard work. But it is a balance where you're going to find some scenarios where it makes sense and some scenarios where it's illogical. A lot of it is tied to a person's work ethic and their ability to take initiative. Because what I find is a lot of people are willing to pay for things without any willingness to work for it. But then some people are willing to work for it and they just need a little bit of an extension to kind of buy them some more time to work a little bit harder. And that's kind of what I ended up doing in fitness. And if I had chosen a different path, I might not have had the same amount of initiative to make that work, where it would have looked much nastier, like much more of a bad decision.
Do you think that either consciously or subconsciously you drew any parallels between like your professional life at that time and like one's fitness journey, where there is this investment and you might classify, it's not true debt, but debt as in like you're working hard, you're putting in time in the gym, you're paying the gym fees, you're paying a trainer, you're paying whatever, and you're not really seeing like, you're not a Mr. Olympia yet. You're just like, kind of chugging along. But then eventually you stick through that, you stay to the process and kind of that consistency piece and all of those things, and then you get wherever it is that you're going. You feel like you're fit and healthy. And I think that there's a lot of parallels there. Do you think that was something that kind of went side by side for you, even subconsciously?
Yep. Yeah, I would say it's kind of one of those areas where it's kind of like, as you reflect on it, it's like, oh man, there is a correlation. So as I would make more meaningful moves within my career on a professional standpoint, I was always doing something that required more dedication, more work within like my physical pursuits. And anytime I slip, both slip. And so it's kind of one of those cool things, because then you can get creative about it. Like sometimes I've been like, okay, I need to push the limits with my activity, and maybe I'm just going to walk, but I'm just going to walk a stupid amount of steps. Like there's been some days I've walked like 30,000 steps. But then the performance of my professional work escalates. And so like I can think of lots of like moments that really stand out to me where like something really awesome happened for me in my professional career, and I was also crushing it in the gym, or with just like how I was preparing for the day, how much I was meal prepping, etc. And so like for better or for worse, sometimes this correlation can reveal for us kind of like a blind spot that we might have. Like maybe we're like, oh, well, I'm on track. Like I'm just choosing the best option for these fast food items, or I'm just choosing the best compromise for this workout. But maybe like the volume is slipping, like they're lifting less and less and less, or maybe their calories are creeping up and up and up. So absolutely, like as I've progressed through jiu-jitsu, I would have to say my bandwidth has increased. My ability to communicate with people has gotten even better. And I don't consider myself to be a bad communicator, but I would have to say jiu-jitsu helps you to be reflective and kind of like leave your stuff with you while being able to understand and take in other people's stuff and like give them the most relevant response, rather than giving them the relevant response plus some extra stuff that's useless to them. It kind of helps it definitely helps with conciseness, helps to stop from overthinking, helps with any kind of like see something on social media and take on the weight on yourself. Like you don't do that after you've done jiu-jitsu, because it's just like that doesn't matter. And then you can kind of like focus on the things that do. So yeah, very long answer to your question, but I would say that there is some crossover there.
Why do you think that jiu-jitsu helps with all those things? Because that's not a direct, like jiu-jitsu is not a communication practice. It's martial arts. How does it translate over to helping you with communication?
It takes people away from like this, a lot of people kind of walk around almost with like a force field around them, where it's like, you can't access me, you can't reach me, you don't know what I think about myself, you don't know whether I'm good or bad, I'm just putting on a show so you feel that I'm scary. When you do jiu-jitsu, the force field's gone. Doesn't matter how scary you look, you might get taken out by a 15-year-old. Doesn't matter how much you lift, you could be submitted by somebody 100 pounds lighter than you. Like one of the professors at the gym, or coaches, his name is Huthaifa, shout out to him. And I'm probably somewhere in the ballpark of like 80 pounds heavier than him. He could absolutely annihilate me, and he could annihilate anybody at his skill level with that weight discrepancy, because he's just got such a skill set for technique. I would say that he is inherently like brave. Like he has more balls than most people who compete, where he's not scared of what would happen if he got hurt. He just kind of jumps into the fire. So it's just like removing that force field where you feel like you're protecting yourself and having to be just in the elements, and then realizing that if you react irrationally to things, it comes back to bite you. So you have to be more calm in your reaction to different scenarios, whether you feel like you're in danger, whether you feel like you have an advantage. You still have to kind of step into things slowly and kind of think about it, and then think about the long game. There's lots of times when I've been in a competition where I see where I'm at with the timer. I'm like, okay, if I do this, I'm going to be exhausted by that 5-minute mark, and I think we're going to make it to the 5-minute mark. So what if I did this first? Or it'll just be like, this gets them points, let's get them out of there, or this gets me points, let's get me to there. There's just a lot of like layers to the situation where you start to think of things with more in mind than just the immediate reward or the short-term gain. So that's where I think it starts to kind of like change the way we think and change the way we see things and people and situations.
Interesting. It sounds kind of like, to sum it up in a phrase, is more of like a kind of crushes your ego a little bit more, so that you can actually think about things a little bit maybe more logically and less emotionally, and maybe analyze things more, take some time to think about what's actually happening. And then the whole element of like just being off your phone, being less reactive, like, being in the real world, being in maybe a bit of a buzzword, but like a primal situation. Not that like jiu-jitsu class is life and death and whatever, but it is like simulating a combat scenario, which like I don't know how to science this, but there's got to be something like within us as humans that like that feels it feels right, and it helps you just be a more complete person. And I know that kind of just sounds like a bunch of gibberish and doesn't exactly mean anything, but I think that there's something there, and I think that all physical pursuits probably help that, including just like lifting weights and regular exercise, but combat sports and training more specifically for sure. I know that, you know, you're saying those things. The 1 year that I did jiu-jitsu, which I'm like dying to get back into it, I definitely felt that as well. So there's something there. There's something there for sure. And this is why I think amongst all of the physical benefits and losing weight and your back pain and all the things, people like us are so big on like just pushing exercise. Like we know that there's so much more, and we can't define it. We can say these words and it helps you be better, but that doesn't really mean a whole lot until you feel it. And then you feel it and you're like, that's what all those gym guys meant.
Mm-hmm.
But if only we could translate it a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know how to like get that message across though. So this is maybe that communication, like the clarity of communication, in order to get that message across. But I mean, this is why we have these podcasts and we have all of the content and all of the things that we do. And it doesn't always have to be so drastic. Like you mentioned, sometimes increasing your activity just through walking, right? 30K steps, 20K steps. Tell me about like, why do you push your steps that high? Because that's a lot. Like most people struggle to get 8,000. Like 30K seems impossible.
Yeah. So to put things into more context to help people understand where I was coming from when I was doing my 30K steps, first and foremost, through the lens of walking has kind of one of those immediate net benefits to my life as a whole. I've noticed everything from my heart rate decrease as I walk more, like my resting heart rate, just from walking without any change to my conditioning training or my volume of training jiu-jitsu. But the primary goal for me is I am cutting weight to get into a lower weight class for future competitions. But I don't want to do that strictly on a nutrition protocol. Not that I'm being sloppy with my nutrition. My nutrition's improving as well. And walking is kind of one of those things that I can consistently recover from at a predictable rate, where I can also kind of tie in other things that I need to do. Like I listen to a ton of podcasts, not only for my own just betterment, but also just to find different guests or to get different perspectives, hear different conversations. Like if there's somebody that I wouldn't necessarily be interviewing directly, I can still learn their point of view through listening to a podcast that they've appeared on. And then the way that I've kind of made it more practical, because 30,000 steps takes an awful lot of time. I will pair it with, like, if I have local meetings with people, I'll set it up as walks. And then every time I go to the grocery store, like for the last 3 months, I've walked. And so the grocery stores are respectively 2.4 and 2.6 kilometers away. So each time I do that, it's usually a 5 or 6 kilometer round trip, which works out great. And then I'm carrying groceries, so it's a bit of a farmer carry. But yeah, that's kind of the thought process. End goal primarily being kind of health maintenance, because I do like having that lower heart rate. There's times when my resting heart rate is around 45. I'm like, holy crap. And I get the notification from my Apple Watch that my heart rate was at 39 beats per minute for 10 minutes. I'm like, that could be good or bad, but we'll just monitor it closely. But I like to know that my heart is healthy, and I like being outside and seeing people. I think that's a benefit in and of itself for walking, getting the sunlight if I can get out there during the daylight hours. Otherwise, I'm Batman walking in the darkness. But yeah, that's kind of contextualizes why I accumulate that many, and by exceeding that 20,000 steps and getting into the 30,000, it allows me to really move the dial with my activity without feeling any negative effects. Whereas if I did it with I used to do a lot of spin classes and I would burn out fast. It would crush my immune system, but walking, no negative effect, no muscle soreness, no mood swings, nothing bad, just walking. Super easy.
So a couple things that I want to zero in on here. And the first is maybe less exciting to anyone listening, but perhaps more important. And that's that how it impacts your actual health, like your heart health and your cardiovascular system. I think that we get too caught up on I need to do cardio to burn calories and lose weight. And while that certainly helps and helps move the needle, and we'll talk about that second, that's not the main thing. It's almost like a side effect of what's happening, where the main thing that we need to care about is our actual health. Having a healthy heart and cardiovascular system is pretty important, I would say. It's good to be healthy. And I don't think that's a crazy, statement to make. But so overlooked. And so people will forego their cardio because, I'm trying to build muscle, so I don't want to burn too many calories. It's well, you're not burning that many calories, but also your heart needs to be healthy. This is an important thing. And so has there been any, did you have any heart issues or anything like that previous to driving your steps up this high? Did you have anything that you were trying to combat or pay attention to, or just in general that you noticed that it happened, obviously?
I've just been a big fan of keeping an eye on blood pressure and stuff like that. I noticed during the pandemic, my blood pressure went up to a point where it was hey, pay attention to this. And then I did pay attention to it. And then I stopped paying attention to it. And then I paid attention to it. And then I stopped. And so by having something baked into my lifestyle, that sort of ensures that I will just by default be within a range that's healthy. And then bigger picture kind of thing, I am in a stage in my life where I'm realizing that what I do now has an exponential effect on what can happen for me in the future. I am someone who, I was saying this, I think on my own podcast recently, I have a great conviction that I will have a family one day. But I've also had a lot of friends who, when they try to have a family at an older age, it's very difficult, and they might have to go through a lot of different hoops and tunnels and stuff to kind of make it happen. So I'm okay, I know that if I go into my 40s with high blood pressure and I don't have a very high step count and I'm not getting enough sleep and my stress isn't managed, my odds of being a family man have decreased substantially. But it's if I can solidify these habits now and kind of maintain these health markers that could help me in the future, I'll have a better chance of having things go the way I would wish them to go, even though I don't have control over all these things in life. To be fully transparent for the audience, the one thing that I know that I have control in my life is that I'll have an epic barn gym one day. Aside from that, it's all just life just allows things to just happen or not happen, and you learn from it, or you feel grateful that it worked out.
It's so important that you said that, because the word chance and giving yourself the best chance for success, for health, for positive outcomes is what this is all about. One criticism, which is silly to criticize exercise and weightlifting and nutrition and all this stuff, but it exists out there, is well, you don't really expand how long you live. And well, how much of your life are you going to waste in the gym versus just enjoying it? Are you really going to not enjoy, cookies and alcohol and cigarettes and whatever because you want to live a couple of years longer? And it's it's not about that. It's about giving yourself the best chance to live a better life, not necessarily a longer life, but a better life. And God forbid something does happen. You walk out on the street tomorrow and get hit by a bus. If you are in shape and your body is strong and healthy, I'm not saying you're going to survive a car accident or some catastrophic event, but you have a way better chance of surviving that and or recovering from that versus someone who is not in shape, unhealthy, and all these things. And so we don't know what life is going to hold for us, but we want to set ourselves up for the best chance for success in all aspects. And that of course goes like financial and all the stuff with the big barn gym as well. You don't just snap your fingers and make that happen, but it's like you want to set yourself up for the best chances of making these things happen. And that is what health is all about. So I think that's a perfect answer for why we should care about steps and care about cardio in general, because it's just going to make your life, give yourself a better chance at a better life overall.
Well, thank you.
So let's talk about then pushing the needle on moving your weight class down. The outwork your diet thing is something that has been talked about ad nauseum probably at this point, right? You can't just outwork your diet. You got to clean up your diet. That's the only way to lose weight. While there is some truth to that, it's not totally true. And there is a point of like, well, you can outwork some of this. You can't outwork a diet of eating 8,000 calories of McDonald's every day. Like that's not going to happen, but that's not what we're talking about here. Your diet's clean, you can push the needle. So tell me about how are you measuring this? How did you arrive at that number of steps? Are you tracking calories on this? Is it a calculated thing, or do you just know that if you push activity up that far, you can get away with eating a little bit more?
So it's kind of multifaceted because to run things through the filter of how I kind of measure it, I recently invested in an Apple Watch. It's not like the best accessory for measuring fitness, but it's one that works for me because from a productivity standpoint, all of my devices are Apple. And so it just kind of allows me the best, like if somebody's sending me a message, the watch is going to be able to read it because it's talking to my phone, it's talking to my computers, all that stuff. But it allows me to see kind of like the blind spots that I wasn't aware of before. Whereas like what I have really noticed is the number of times that somebody probably tells us that they're hitting their 10,000 steps and they just probably aren't. And so like I'll be able to know the difference between an 8,000 step day and a 20,000 step day. And I'll realize like what habits had to be in the day to make that happen. And as such, I will start to kind of like coordinate my days to sort of like support that to continue to happen. I do this silly thing where I will spread out my grocery trip into multiple trips instead of having it all in one trip, just to give me reasons to get that extra like 8 to 10,000 steps. And I will start to plan locations for meetings to be within walking distance of my place, even if it's like 5 kilometers each way, rather than just choosing some like fancy area on the other side of the city. From a like seeing the progress point of view, I basically like, I look at it this way. There's very few instances where from like a physical standpoint, we truly actually like push ourselves, because there's fewer and fewer opportunities to do so, because we're living in a world where we are almost more rewarded for pushing ourselves the least. We have the opportunity to order all of our meals to our door. We have the opportunity to do work that requires us to move minimally, if not at all. And so the chances of somebody in our community exercising too much is extremely low. And I think about it as, how much can I afford to walk that day? Like without cutting into any of my billable hours, without cutting into like I like to call my parents pretty much every day. And so I'm not going to bypass a call with them to walk. Sometimes I'll talk to them while I walk. But, and then also like if I was going to walk so much that it meant that I couldn't train the next day, that's too much walking. And so 30,000 is basically where I've maxed, and that is the only reason for that number. If I was going to go for like a minimum number, I usually aim for at least over 12,000. And that is just like, I have seen the research where a bulk of the benefits peak at about 8,000. But then I've also seen where when it comes from a weight cutting standpoint, that a lot of people seek benefit or get benefit from like exceeding 16,000. And many of these examples are just like a one of one example where it was like a few people in a very small pool had applied this to their lifestyle and saw results. So this isn't the most sciencey example. However, the fact that there's people that I know personally who are out there doing it and experiencing these benefits is far and along more progressive than if they weren't doing it and were just like making shit up. But largely it's just based on like, if I can afford to walk this much in a day, I'm just going to see. I'm going to like, if I have a day where I can walk 50,000 steps, I will do it. There's one funny example where I walked from Manhattan, New York to LaGuardia Airport, and I polled my audience and I asked who thought I was going to do it. And I think the only person who thought I was going to do it was Dean Guido. And it's just funny because like he's known me long enough.
Walk More King, if anyone doesn't know his Instagram handle.
Yeah, like he should be advocating for walking, so it's rightfully so that he said I was going to do it. But then he's also known me long enough that if he's voted no, I would do it just to spite him. Like I do these surveys in my Instagram story where I'll be like, do you think I'm going to get this many steps or this many? This many or this many? This many or this many? And I'll have like this really high number. And a lot of people aim for like the middle, or they'll be like, oh no, he's going to get 10,000. If I put the high number in there, I'm always going to exceed it, even if I'm out walking till 11 p.m. Because it's just, that's kind of how I am. And a few of my clients have learned that. They're like, oh, I always vote for the highest number because that's who you are. But yeah, it's just like, if I can see if I can get 40,000 steps in a day, I'm going to do it. Because it doesn't harm anybody. I have noticed that I've had to get like, I have like this, it's like squirrel nuts or something, like squirrel nut, like, anti-chafing thing.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's like, it looks like a stick of deodorant. It sounds ridiculous as I'm describing it on a podcast. I don't have squirrel nuts. I have an anti-chafing product for when your legs rub together. And then, there's a few things that you have to take into consideration when you are walking that much. And I've done 20,000 with a weighted vest, and that makes a pretty big difference. But I could still train jiu-jitsu the next day. So as long as that is in place, then it's not too much. And with that said, it does help with like the changes in my physique. It kind of like expedites it. But it's not like it removes the need to be conscious of the nutrition quality and the amount of protein and the amount of fiber. Like all of the nutrition protocol still has its place. But I would say, if nothing else, if somebody was discouraged for lack of progress with their physical journey and they wanted to feel a bit more progress, if they just walked, if nothing else, it would make them feel emotionally better and more open to the time it takes to get to their overarching goal, like their big long-term goal. Because like psychologically, they'd feel better. From a mobility standpoint, they'd probably feel better because there's so much movement through the rib cage that I think people take for granted. Like the amount of like, if you are injured in your hips, your knees, your shoulders, walking, as long as it's pain-free, will probably help you with your recovery far more than not walking.
I've definitely noticed that in myself, and I've been injured almost more than anyone else I know, and like always walking as part of that recovery is a huge part of it. One, because of the movement. Two, I think there's something about the blood flow that's just being put through your body a little bit more. Not that you're walking at such a high pace where your heart's pumping, but there's a little bit more blood flow, so it's bringing nutrients to the injured area and flushing out inflammation and all of that kind of stuff. And of course, as long as it's pain-free, as long as it's, whatever, it feels good to you. But I mean, the thing here is this: weight loss is still just like a math problem. And so, yes, you can't out-eat that. You can walk 30, 40,000 steps and you could easily just eat more than that. It wouldn't be that hard to whatever calorie burn that is. But the thing that I think matters here is we get caught up as a society on like numbers and rules. And so the 10,000 step rule or a study showed 8,000 steps is good. And it's like, it doesn't really matter. These are just like ballpark numbers. And I think the history of the 10,000 steps thing was like a marketing story for like a pedometer thing, which is fine. Like, it's great. It's just a nice round number. There's no way that like the ideal step count for humans is an exactly nice round number. It seems insane, but it doesn't matter with the numbers. It matters that it's more than what you were doing before, and it matters that it works for you, and that it's burning enough calories if you're using it for a weight loss tool to offset whatever it is that you don't want to eat less, right? If you can burn 500 extra calories a day by walking, then you get to eat 500 calories a day more as long as you're still in a deficit and your rate of weight loss would still be the same. Another reason that I think it's really good, and I think that you highlighted this as well, is that from a psychological standpoint, it's a positive action versus taking away food from yourself being like a negative action. And I think that there's something about doing something rather than removing things that is also helpful, because weight loss, it's hard, it sucks, it's not fun, it's not a fun process for anyone really, unless maybe you're a bodybuilder in the final stages of prep because you know that you're doing it for a thing, but it's also way more brutal, but it's not a fun process. And so I think adding some positivity to it as in a positive action is definitely helpful, because you're kind of taking charge of your health, and then all of the trickle-down effects that happen with that, kind of linking back to what we were talking about in the beginning, where when exercise is kind of more dialed in, your training is more dialed in, nutrition is more dialed in, then your work in professional life also just by chance gets like better and more dialed in, and so does your family life and your relationships. And I think it's just because of we're just paying attention to things a little bit more. We're being more structured, we're being more disciplined, we're checking things off the list, like we're doing all the things that we should be, and that just it's a positive cascading event or effect where we get all these good things kind of in a row. But there's nothing like lifting more weights is not going to actually help you be better at accounting or whatever office job. It's not directly related, but tangentially it's related, I think, in the mindset thing. So I think that that's really important just to state there as well.
Mm-hmm. Completely agree.
You mentioned about the Apple Watch, and I know that, and you're also the tech guy. So as far as making our lives easier, and we want to try and find ways to like make our lives harder, there are tools that do help us. So in addition to the Apple Watch, is there anything fitness tech or apps or otherwise that you've used or know of that you find are more beneficial than others, or that have helped a lot in order to like make things simpler, track things, or whatever?
In the lens of fitness, in the lens of productivity, or what are we thinking here?
Fitness.
Okay, so I'm going to give it a unique example, and it is the context in which I have used AI with regards to just kind of like getting through any roadblocks, whether it be in programming others or whether it be in programming myself. And I have taken and copied and pasted like a structured like 3-day program and then pasted it into ChatGPT, or even just like dragged like the Excel sheet into there, or like the Google Sheet export. You can also, like, if you're using like an app, you can screenshot like the actual visual of like the program from your phone and drop it in, or from your desktop screen. And I will sometimes get it to audit some of the programming, and I'll be like, the goal is blank. From an unbiased perspective, how effective do you think that this programming would be if that was the goal? And do you have any additional questions for me to help you answer this question? And sometimes it will point out maybe inefficiencies in like a superset. They'll be like, well, where are these equipment? Are they close? Are they far? These kind of look like things that would be far away. In other cases, it'll be like, well, we actually would suggest using a machine for this exercise to help that person get more volume. Maybe it was using a machine instead of using a Swiss ball for just a specific exercise where the person didn't necessarily need help with like positioning, but just needed to train their hamstrings. And so it just kind of like takes me out of my little like echo chamber where I'm always like, because like there's people who I've programmed for like 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, where you kind of get into this like, okay, here we go again, putting them through their workout. We're going to give them this, and this, because it's this week. And it's kind of like going to, when you go to a seminar, let's say like Dr. Pat Davidson was putting on a seminar and you walked away from that and you're like, oh, I'm going to layer in this other programming. And well, when we use an unbiased perspective to use the information that it has to sort of audit the stuff that we think is perfect, it can kind of reveal some of the areas where we might have just kind of gotten complacent and forgot that we need to kind of like change some things in a direction that serves that person's best interests and not our interests of trying to like check those boxes, get that program done, etc. Also just for our own programming. However, I do think it's like, I have done programs done by colleagues like 4 or 5 times, and every time is just like so awesome because they're doing their very best work to kind of set you up with something that, from the best of their knowledge of you, is going to get you to your goal. And if you're following it to a T, you get to understand the point of view that your clients may have, maybe some like things that you're missing as far as communication, feedback, asking questions. You get to learn another person's training style. And it's just that whole blue ocean thing where it's like, you have experienced one person's like service model, and if you ever find somebody that kind of matches that better than they match yours, then you can refer them. So yeah, long-winded answer for you, but generally speaking, I am a heavy user of AI, but I use it within the scope of like having it as a team member and not having it do my work for me or do my writing for me or make things up from nothing. Like, I'm not getting it to just blindly write workout programs because I can't do it. It's more so like, check my work because I know that I'm not perfect.
That makes sense. I use it not that much, but when I do use it, excuse me, in kind of in the same way where it's more of like call it like a brainstorming tool where I'll throw out an idea. I'm like, hey, make this a little bit better. Or what do you think of this? And then I'll play with whatever responses it gives me. And then usually end up like combining. It'll spark an idea for me. And then I'll just be like, oh, okay, that's what I meant to say. And then I'll just do that for programming or for writing something or for like podcast titles and stuff like that, right? It's just like it's a brainstorming tool. Have you experimented with it at all from like, not maybe to use for clients, but just like hey, here's a client avatar, male, 35 years old, this equipment, whatever, and it spits out a workout program for you. Does it do a decent job at that? Have you tried that at all?
I have more of an answer for you than you may have expected. So like, I've used it to enhance like onboarding processes where you can get ChatGPT to kind of design like your intake form. And then you can kind of give it a template for like a client profile. So like some behind the scenes insight with like, I work with A-Team Fitness as one of the coaches and kind of helping with the back end. And so for anybody who doesn't know, A-Team Fitness is Alex McBrearty's business. And we use a lot of psychology within that. So then we're looking at like the big four with regards to people's different traits. Whether they are somebody who's talkative, open to change, conscientious, all that stuff. And when you provide it with kind of like an output model, like a profile as to like, what's their birth date, when did they start, what's their personality traits, what's their past injuries and stuff. And then you pair that with kind of like a form that you can create with like the code within ChatGPT. Giving it that context can help it to ask you the questions needed to give you sort of like a foundation where you're not going to take your impression of a client 3 programs prior and then place it on this client just because you got in the rhythm of like, okay, we're going to give them trap bar deadlift, we're going to give them incline press, and we're going to give them lat pull down just because that's what we do. It's more so going to be from a perspective of this person says they want to train twice a week and they have this much time, so their workouts are going to be a little bit shorter. And then it's going to focus on, okay, they've had a hip surgery and their mobility on their right shoulder is a little bit limited. And so maybe it'll start giving them like neutral exercises and a few more machine exercises. And So like I have used it as like a filter to help me stay on track with things. Do I use it every single time? Not every single time. Do I see things shifting to where every single time will become more common? Yes. And with regards to whether it gives me like a 100% awesome program every time I utilize it in any capacity, whether it's a simple prompt or a more complicated prompt, ChatGPT makes mistakes all the time. Like no matter what application I run it through, like whether I'm doing show notes for podcasts, well, I produce a few podcasts. So sometimes I get it to do show notes for Chasing Common Ground and it titles it with the wrong person, or like it commonly responds to me or refers to me as like the wrong name because I used a different name for a different project like 6 months ago, and it's just been hung up on that ever since. So that's where it's exciting because ChatGPT, AI, Gemini, all that stuff isn't going to give a dumb person superpowers. It's going to make your average intellectual person more productive. A person who doesn't have like the baseline skill set for what they're using AI for will not progress further than they would have without AI. A person who is going to progress no matter what will probably progress faster if they're leveraging AI while also using like their critical thinking skills and applying like the knowledge that they have in that area to their basically what they're getting out of ChatGPT. They might learn, oh, that output, that's a little bit flawed, so they're going to tweak it. They might see, that workout, it's close, but there's a few things missing, like, because it's pulling from data. It might get you doing, like, side planks, and maybe in this situation, it'd be better to do more of, like, a cable chop. So just all these little details, but it's still, like, it's kind of like having a calculator and refusing to use it. Like if you have a calculator, it's good to be able to do math equations on a piece of paper, but it's also good to know how to do that and then speed up the process and use the calculator. And just like calculators make mistakes sometimes one of those bars is missing and we don't read the digits right, or it just blanks out. Everything makes mistakes, technology included.
Yeah, it's not going to be perfect, but it's a tool like any other. So like a hammer also doesn't work that well if you don't know how to use it, right? Like an AI chat model or large language model is going to work as well as you are at prompting it and using it. Like I've played around with asking ChatGPT just to, give me a 3-day-a-week workout and like with no other information. And it will give you exercises to do, but you look at this and be like, okay, this is just it did exactly what I asked it to do, which is it just spit me out a random assortment of exercises and organized it in a workout, which is not good. But you give it, I'm this age, I have this experience, I have access to this equipment, I have this much time, I have this much training experience. These are my goals, these are my injuries. You give it a few more limitations, and then it's going to probably get some better outcomes for you. And I think just for coaches, obviously there's some business use here, but for regular people, like if you're just looking for a generic workout, it's a good tool if you play around with it enough. And I think it's even better on the nutrition side of things. I've used that a little bit, and it's like, hey, give me a meal plan. People ask for meal plans far too often without knowing that it's not really the thing that they need, and like, fine. But, you throw it in ChatGPT, I need to eat this many calories, I need this much protein, here are the foods I like, here are the foods I don't like, give me a grocery list. It does that very, very well. And that is like figuring out these like, how do I, or what do I do when kind of questions. I think the AI is easily the biggest tool we have. The thing it's just not going to do is the accountability piece. And that's like where humans are we're still going to win at that for a while.
Well, there's one more facet of the whole utilizing AI that I've utilized that might be helpful. So I have an online client that's worked with me since 2020 or so, and she has gone to physio, she's gone to chiro, she's gone to all these things. And whenever she does, she'll kind of send me like the summary, the notes that practitioner or professional had provided her to give me as much insight for my programming as possible. And generally I'm pretty good at like modifying exercises or choosing different exercise selections. But now that I have ChatGPT as well, I'll do that thing that I was talking about where I will like screenshot like the platform outline of the program, and I'll put that into a prompt thread on ChatGPT. And then I will request ChatGPT to kind of audit that programming based on the insight from this practitioner. So let's say it was a physiotherapist. And then I'll take the summary of the notes and put that in there as well. And then I'll have this, usually when I'll be doing something like this, I'll just be like super clear on like what I am looking for within the program, as far as like maybe it's like a range of motion thing with the shoulders, just so that it is specific as to what it is looking for. And in a lot of cases, it might suggest like a modification that I wouldn't have thought of. A lot of times I also have to be specific. I'm like, okay, you're basing these alternate exercises based on the equipment showcased in the exercise selection of the previous program. And so if it's seeing that I'm using like cable machines, it's going to suggest cable machine exercises. If it's seeing that I'm not using any machines and it's just dumbbells, then it's going to like prescribe accordingly. Sometimes it might just do like wall reference exercises where you're kind of like, you're doing a dumbbell movement, but you're using the wall as an external reference to keep yourself from moving anything that you're not planning to move. And it's just, that is a nice way to work alongside our other fitness professionals who are able to uncover some of our blind spots and keep our people pain-free. And it increases our competency where we don't become so complacent and stuck in our own world, and we're more open to utilizing their feedback into our programming for the best interests of our person that we're looking to serve.
Right. And then I think for the non-coach, non-practitioner listening to this and trying to figure things out on their own and do their own programming and answer nutrition questions, like my understanding of ChatGPT is that it takes information from the internet and kind of like summarizes it and gives you the answer. So if you ask it like, is blah, blah, blah diet good, it will give you an answer based on like all of the information, and it'll probably give you some caveats. It might be good for this. It might be bad for this. Here's a good way to do it. Here's a not good way to do it. And so I think it's going to stop a lot of confusion once people start using it more, where we still have arguments in comment sections of social media posts about do calorie deficits exist? And it's like we need to get past these like basic things and have more nuanced, more important conversations that are actually helpful. And all of the what's a good back exercise? Like that's a valid question. If you've never been to the gym before, like how would you know the answer to that question? But like these very basic questions are extremely figure-outable, very easily figure-outable. And we need to have more complex conversations about, well, how do you actually then go about and execute that in your life? How do you schedule it into your day? How do you alter things that maybe make sense for you? If it hurts when you do it this way, what if you turn your hand, a little bit to the outside or a little bit to the inside and then do it that way? Like these are the things that I think the AI tech is probably going to lag behind, and it will probably mostly be due to human error and not knowing how to ask the right questions. But like the base level 1 stuff, like this can easily be figured out by AI now. And I think that most people are probably, and I'm not talking about coaches, but because I probably don't use it enough either, but just in your own fitness and health, like probably not tapping into that enough as a resource, because it is going to give you at least a solid foundation of everything that's out there, and way more effective than like buying the newest gadget. Like the Apple Watch is great, like you said, it does what it does, but like it doesn't actually give you any answers. It gives you insights that you have to then do something about, but it's not actually going to like figure out a problem for you.
Exactly.
So that's kind of what is there any, I was assuming that you were going to talk about AI when I was asking you about any tech stuff, but are there any other gadgets or any other things? I mean, a weighted vest would be a gadget, not so much a tech thing, but are there any other things that you've been using lately that you found like specifically helpful or more helpful than you thought?
I mean, from a very simple point of view, I'm currently standing on a walking treadmill. It's not running, but I'm standing on it. And I find that to be kind of one of those like low hanging fruit for like 90% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're like, well, like I get around a lot, just to have something. I like the idea of having a backup plan. Because so many people fall off track because maybe they got sick, they couldn't leave the house. But then as a result, their movement dropped. Even if it was just like little short walks, they didn't do them because they didn't go outside. Or like thinking about the weather and how weather can throw people off. Like the number of in-person people I've had cancel a session, rightfully so, because it was just crazy cold or blizzard or the car wouldn't start. But then as a result, instead of getting 3 workouts that week, or instead of getting 5,000 steps that day, they got no workouts or 800 steps. And
I need to interrupt you there for a second, Chris, and just to make a caveat that for people listening, Chris lives in Edmonton, where there is real winter. There is real amounts of snow, real cold. Like winter is a legitimate problem for things in your life for a certain period of the year. If you don't live in real Canada, like me in Toronto, the weather is not an excuse other than like the maybe one crazy blizzard we get a year. But it doesn't get that cold here. It doesn't snow that much. Like weather is almost not a real excuse. But please continue.
Oh my gosh. I was like, oh, did I say something bad? Is my microphone broken? But I was like, oh no, he has a point. People die outside here. Yeah. But like, it is crazy how many things legitimately become an obstacle for us. And so kind of similar to our approach with like walking more allows you to have something instead of taking something away. By having as many sort of like backup plans or protocols in place where you can still maintain that activity with the knowledge that our world is designed to reduce the amount of movement that we get, to reduce the amount of work that we do, not from like a trading time for money perspective, but from a physical output perspective, energy balance perspective. The average person's energy balance is lower, so they're eating out of surplus much easier. Whereas a farmer doesn't have to keep so much track of things because they're walking across the field, they're doing all these things, they're lifting things. A desk worker, really, there's nothing in their job description that requires them to be super, super active if they're working from home at a desk. And like, I've even seen my own days where if I have a day of Zoom calls and I'm not walking on the walking treadmill, I could get through the whole day identifying as someone who really likes fitness, really active guy. And if I didn't get to the gym that day, I could finish the day with less than 1,000 steps, which is crazy. But like, going to the bathroom isn't that many steps. Going to the fridge isn't that many steps. Going to my bed isn't that many steps. And even if I walked to the gym and back, I might still not get that 10,000 steps, depending which gym I walk to, because there's a few different gyms that I walk to. But it's just like, it's eye-opening. And so like my thought process is just like some people benefit from having a couple dumbbells in their house. I think we're at a point in society where investing in like a pretty cheap walking treadmill isn't a bad idea. Mine, bought it online for $150. I've gotten the majority of my clients to do the same. Just because having that like mindset to be open to the ways society is changing and doing something about it is far more progressive than being aware of what society is doing and just kind of being like, oh, well, I guess I'll make up for it next lifetime. Like, it's now or never. Like, do something about it now. And you'll reap the benefits for years to come.
Agreed. And well said. And I completely agree with like the walking treadmill is a thing. It just removes some barriers. There's so many activities that we do that you could just do while walking, even if they're work stuff. Everyone, no matter what job you have like some amount of, lower brain input things that like, I'm sure like you're not walking right now because you're focusing on this. If I was, writing client programming or writing an important email or editing one of the podcasts or something like that, like I'm not going to be moving while I'm doing that. I need to like sit down and like, lock in. But there are things where you can be maybe just reading through emails that you don't care about, or talking on the phone to somebody, or there are, whatever your job is, there's stuff that you can do that doesn't require 100% of your focus sitting down at your computer at your desk, that you can be moving very slowly and just finding ways to inject that movement into your day. And it seems like not that much, but you add it up over the course of a day and then over the course of a week and months and years, and it's going to, it will change your life. And that is not even a hyperbole to say. It will change your life.
Yeah, yeah.
Good stuff, Chris. I appreciate you, man. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that you feel that we didn't get to today?
I think that this is going to be like a quick little nugget of a side tangent, totally off topic of everything that we've talked about. But right now, because I like to talk about things where I'm actually doing them, then I'm not just like talking about things that I'm not doing. I have kind of gone into a mode where I'm just signing up for as many different like networking events as possible with no real agenda. Like there's lots of different perspectives you could look at it through. I'm obviously someone who is chasing down my future wife one day, but I'm not like going to this event being like, where's my wife? And I'm someone who likes to learn from people. Like I was telling my parents the other day, I was like, man, I love learning. Like whether it be within the fitness area, technology, video, I like learning about different industries like nuclear power and renewable energy and oil and gas. Like I like learning about all the stuff. And so I would challenge people to kind of get into that area of their life where they just start going to things where they don't necessarily know anybody. They don't know what's going down. They don't know if they're going to be sold something or not. They don't know if people are going to like them or hate them, and just start going to stuff. If you're a fitness professional, obviously I've been doing this thing where I shout out Aram Gregorian's conference. I'm like, go to the Real Coaches Summit. If you are just like an everyday person, go to like neighborhood things, go to farmers markets, go to business networking events. You don't need to go to like a club or anything, but if there's like a one-off of anything, I'm going to 2 events this week that are sponsored by a bank, and I'm going to mix and mingle with different business owners. And a few months ago, I'd be like, oh, no, I don't have time. Or, oh, no, I already know too many people. Because like I know a lot of people. But it's just, that is something that I'm doing. And one of the biggest reasons is I find the more people I connect with in real life, just kind of the better my whole life gets. My communication style, my connections, my ability to socialize, because if we're at home for too long, our social skills kind of deteriorate. It's just we get in real life and we're not on a Zoom call anymore, and we're like, ooh, what do I do? Do I say hi? And just like, I find the more we expand our net, just the better quality of life we get. Like, I'm sure that there's some kind of outcome-based research that the person who shakes the most hands and hugs the most people probably feels the best about their life at the end of their life, rather than the person who hesitated to meet someone new, the person who hesitated to hear somebody's story. They might be feeling like something is missing all the time. So yeah, that would be my challenge, is like, go to stuff with no real agenda. You don't have to go be finding your future wife. You don't have to be trying to find a job or trying to like get new clients. Just go just to see what's happening. Like FAFO with the networking events.
I like that advice a lot. It's something that I have heard before and I know to be true. And I know that I need to do a better job at that as well. So I appreciate you saying that. One quick analogy, and then we'll wrap it. My cousin told me, explain this to me in this way one time. This was a while ago. And he's basically like, it's kind of like this whole networking and, life, whatever, success stuff that comes with this is kind of like playing a game of pinball. And, you're just smashing the pads, and you don't like, no one really, I don't think anyone's good at pinball, but whatever. You're just smashing the things, and every once in a while you hit the thing at the top corner that like gets you 1,000 points or whatever it is. And most of the time you're just kind of like fucking around and things are going all over the place and whatever's happening. You will never hit that like 1,000 point, the big thing, if you're not playing the game. If you're sitting at home, the pinballs are not moving at all and nothing's going to happen. If you're at least bouncing around, there's a good chance, not a good chance, but there's a chance that you're going to hit the winner, hit the jackpot. And so you got to get out there and like do things to actually make that happen. And I will say, from the coach's perspective, if there are any other coaches, like go to Rom's event, go to Andrew Coates' event, go to the industry events, as I've started going to them in the past couple of years. And that's how we connected, Chris, and many other guests from the podcast and other people. And it's a tremendous thing to be a part of. So if you're a coach, definitely go to these events. But if you're not, like, go to other events where people in your industry or outside of your industry are there, and just meet people, because people are cool.
Sweet. Yeah.
Good stuff, man. I appreciate you. Where can people find you? Where can they tap into everything that you've got going on? I'll throw it in the show notes, as you know, but rattle it off here for us.
So the easiest ways to find me is you go to Instagram and find @ChristianLiddle. I also have 2 websites. One is kind of like a landing page, which will expand a bit more. I'm adding in some testimonial stuff, and it is invigoratetraining.com. And that's where I'm doing most of like my fitness, nutrition, podcast related stuff. And then I have another website, christianliddle.com. And that's where I have a course on CapCut. And then I'm going to expand on some material for podcasts, for audio, for all kinds of AI related stuff. So if anybody's ever interested in the nerdy things, they can find me there too. And then chrisliddle.substack.com. That's where you can get emails every time I release a podcast.
Amazing. I'll throw all that in the show notes, but give Chris a follow everywhere, whether you are a fitness enthusiast or a coach. He's someone that you should definitely know. So thank you, Chris. Any last message that you want to leave the people with here in closing?
Yes, because I'm so glad you gave me the opportunity. What I want everybody to do is go to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review. Like, actually write out a review. Make sure it's wholesome and heartfelt. No shit talking. And then go to Spotify, because there's a section where you can leave 5 stars. But then you can actually also leave like comments on each episode, which kind of helps Daniel to know like what direction to take the podcast. I think the comments are just visible to him, but it's just a really cool feature. I believe there's also opportunities to ask him questions. You can also just like reach out and just tell him which episodes that you enjoy, because from like a podcast perspective, the more engagement that they have with their audience, the better the show becomes. It gives you an opportunity to suggest different guests, or it gives you an opportunity to say what really resonated with you, because it's kind of like one of those things where we put our whole heart into a platform where we're like, okay, I'm going to have this conversation because I want to answer this question for this person, or I'm going to have this conversation because I want to better myself for just like society at large. And a lot of people hesitate to reach out to the host themselves, or they think that their review wouldn't make a difference. But it makes a tremendous difference. So be sure to do your homework, do all that stuff, leave your wholesome reviews, no shit talking, and then just like thank him for being him.
You're the man. I appreciate that so much. And if you do want to talk shit, I will talk shit right back to you. So if you're going to give it, you got to take it as well. But I appreciate that, man. It does mean a whole lot for sure, those reviews and those the written reviews especially, and the questions, because you're right. Oftentimes podcasting is like talking into the void. Like, you and I are having a conversation, and then we just put it out there, and it's like, okay, I can see that, people watched it and listened to it and whatever, but like, otherwise, like, did you like it? Did you not like it? What would you want to see more of? What would you want to see less of? Like, we just don't know. So I appreciate that, man. It means a lot.
You bet.
Everybody, thank you very much for listening. Give Chris a follow on all the platforms and tune into everything that he's got going on. Give him 5-star reviews as well on his show and the shows that he's also part of. Yeah, we appreciate you. Thank you very much. See you next time. Go outside, be a good person, and see you soon.